So Steve Hackett releases his new album, Surrender of Silence, a spiky political polemic bristling with rage and spleen, accompanied by an interesting backdrop of world music. But is it any good? Let's find out, shall we? So Steve Hackett releases his new album, Surrender of Silence. This is undoubtedly an angry album bristling with ire and rage. You can almost imagine the banshee-like wails of sirens as the political establishment is seized by factionalised nationalism. We get the very eco-themed Scorched Earth, the dig at mainstream media, which is Fox's Tango. You know, it's very dark, doom-laden guitar tone. Almost reminds me of Black Sabbath's Electric Funeral. The gloomy tones are actually established by the opening track, Obliterate, which is very much an overture for the whole album. I never got to ask Steve Hackett what obliterate actually means, but obliterate, noun, possibly from the verb to obliterate, certainly doesn't sound rosy, does it? Those of you who follow my channel will know that my summer listening tends to be populated with these lysergic psychedelic albums, and I was wrenched from New Potato Caboose, or my Hate Ashbury Haze, so to speak, by this rage-drenched album where Steve Hackett regales us with everything that's gotten his goat over the last year or two. And this album features 11 tracks that Steve has been working on during lockdown. It actually forms a new subgenre of records, really, the lockdown album, where we see these artists with far too much time on their over-sanitised hands have decided to put their time to good use. Fox's Tango is a single, if I'm not mistaken, a gritty number aimed at the mainstream media. As I've said, this album is a political album, and as such, political albums do tend to be somewhat polarising. But in the words of the great Dylan Thomas, when one burns one's bridges, what a lovely fire it makes. We are living in a world that has become somewhat intolerant of any opposing political views, and there are those who will perhaps not warm to Hackett's globalist message on this record. But this song expresses a general dissatisfaction with the media, whether you lean to the left or to the right, hence the term Fox's Tango, a dance. And we get that portentous thud of drums that introduces some pretty heavy and dark riffing, as well as some pretty angry soloing, which sounds like a cry from the eye of the storm. And it's a wonderful melody as well, one you'll be whistling all day long as we foxtrot to the tango of fake news. And it's a message that rings out alongside those beautifully double-tracked guitars. I love the line, half the world living in clover, half the world looking like it's over, or something like that. I don't actually have the lyrics, I'm just trying to work them out from just listening to them. Hackett has actually described this song as a protest song at life's inequalities. In other words, the poor versus the rich. With current conflicts, if we don't learn to share the world, we'll find ourselves sharing the graveyards. This is certainly a far cry from those lush romantic tones of his classical acoustic travelogue Under a Mediterranean Sky, which you can just immerse yourself in, like sink into a hot bath. But this album, rather than inviting us in with these unclouded tones of emotion and beneath cerulean skies, of course, literally bludgeons us into some kind of response, even if it's only to reflect on our own position in the world. We mustn't forget this is also a celebration of world music. We get the wonderful Shanghai to Samarkand. Perhaps my favourite on this album is very Far Eastern flavour. We get the African textures of wing beats to the romantic classical orchestrations of Russia in the track Natalya. Wing Beats is an excellent number, co-written with Steve's wife Jo, if I'm not mistaken, inspired by a recent trip to Ethiopia. Whereas Natalya is an intriguing number that speaks of an archetypal Russian woman who, like Cinderella, will never go to the ball. She's the archetypal sacrificial lamb at the end of each verse. It employs lots of Russian tropes throughout, from the allusion to Prokofiev at the very beginning. There's even a smidgen of Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite and Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies in there as well. We also get the choral voices and the jangling strum of balalaikas just to immerse us in this cultural soup of political and social intrigue, from the iciness of the Kremlin to the frozen expanses of Siberia. It's almost a proggy rendition of Dr. Zhivago. All the tragedy and grandeur is in place here. So on this album we traverse the plains of Africa and African beats to the Mysterian eastern shores, whilst exploring the ocean depths and relaxing music for sharks featuring Feeding Frenzy. Good lord, you try saying that. to The Devil's Cathedral, which is another one of my favourites, which pulls the talents of Steve Hackett's touring band. I love the way this one starts. I almost expect Iron Butterflies in the Garda de Vida to begin. Well, that is until the sax comes in, of course. And Nat Sylvan's voice is just remarkable on this, full of that nuanced melancholy he does so well, so plaintive and expressive. And Hackett's voice is used skillfully as well, especially when it's blended with Amanda Lehman's. It adds emotion and pathos to a number like Scorched Earth, for example. A distinctly eco-themed number, which no doubt have Greta Thunberg applauding from the wings. And Hackett's beautiful and nuanced playing really adds some interesting colours and textures to the palette that is this album. Of course, all aided by his touring band that really gives it some ballast. His touring band are absolutely excellent, by the way. Hackett has described this album as a no-holds-barred record, absolutely, as it employs some serious spleen venting. In fact, he goes on to say, I enjoyed the power of this album, allowing my guitar to scream in joy and rage, and once again flying across these oceans to distant lands. And it presents us with this glorious cacophony of protest. The alternative is just to meld into this homogeneous splodge of conformity, the surrender of silence. It does an album of extraordinary variety and dynamic range, power and beauty. I must admit, I can't wait to hear some of these songs performed live. Hopefully they'll blow away the lockdown cobwebs in one fell swoop. Anyway, you've been listening to a new album review on Steve Hackett's latest album, Surrender of Silence, which is released on the 10th of September. The purchasing links will be put below this video. Also be sure to check out the Seconds Out tour, which also begins about that time as well. Anyway, it just leaves me to say I hope you will click like, subscribe and check that bell to get notified of any future uploads. And generally I hope you're staying safe and staying well, of course, but more importantly that you keep listening.